Well, another week has gone by. It's so good to see you. Welcome to Dow's Weekly Digest. So are you a good listener? I know I can't hear you, but maybe you want to just vocally give the answers here. If I said the word red, what definition would you give? Many times I get the definition of color. But also then it could be I read the book. It could be that our books are in the red. And you emotion also be he saw red. Point being, words are very, very important. You know, there was a time when all of us sat down at the same time for dinner. And it was such the case at a dinner, and the father asked the young son, what'd you learn at school today? Or what'd you do to school today? He says, well, the teacher asked us when we got big and an adult, grown up, who we'd want to be. Well, what did you say? He said, well, I told the teacher I wanted to be Richard Stans. Finally he says, okay, Billy, who is Richard Stans? He says, well, he must be very important because every morning we get up and we say, and to the Republic for Richard Stans. You see, folks, he kind of lost the meaning of that whole saying there in regards to what Richard stands. There was a wedding going on before this social distancing, and they were doing the rehearsal. And they built up to the little boy on what he was going to do. And they give him this special pillow that he was going to carry, and they told him about that. And they told him that, of course, there'd be two very, very special items on that. Okay? And then they put him in the back, and they were all up front. And then someone says, okay, come on down. And the little boy takes about 3 steps, and he goes, "Rawr!" Takes about another 3 steps, and he goes, "Rawr!" And he keeps doing that, "Rawr!" And finally he gets to the end. And he said, why are you doing that? And he said, I'm a ring bearer, and I'm going to act like a ring bearer. So again, you got to explain a little bit what it is on what they may think it is and actually what it is itself. This says this was done by a principal that had a class. The principal happened to be a substitute. And he says, okay, I have a problem for you folks. And if you can get it, you come up to me and tell me, you're going to get 15 minutes early lunch break. And he says, the problem goes like this. Tim worked at a butcher shop. His height was 5 foot 6 inches. His waist was 36 inches. He worked 10 hours a day and earned $75 a day. What did he weigh? They would come up to the principal. He said, nope, that's not the answer. And they'd go back, and he said, well, you can even, you can share this problem with each other if you want. And they'd get together. And then finally, one young man come up, and he said, he weighed meat. He said, that's right. You can go to lunch early. Because the question was not, what was his weight? It said, what did he weigh? And he was a butcher. Are you an active listener, folks? Well, it's time to listen to maybe a little Cowboy Wisdom. Got one here for you. Generally, you ain't learning nothing when your mouth's a-jarring. You know, I had the opportunity this week that I heard a senator looking at maybe the challenges, and from those challenges then opportunities. That senator was Senator John Thune. And in all transparency, John Thune is a senior senator from South Dakota. And he was speaking to the NAFA organization. Some of the points that I wrote down that John brought up was this, that our country is kind of right now, the way he viewed it, as being in a medical self-induced coma. And that we're coming out of it. And when you come out of a medically induced coma in his example, you do it kind of slowly. And then he quoted President Lincoln. And I found that quote, and I'd like to share it with you if I could here. If we could first know where we are and whether we are tending, we could then better judge what to do and how to do it. Taking that slower approach as things and opportunities that were previously challenges come up to us. John observed the term he used, the American spirit. He said, folks, the American spirit has not been dampened at all. It's out there. It's alive. He says, I observe it every day. I can describe the American spirit, he said, in 2 words: resiliency and compassion. He also quoted Warren Buffett. Never, never bet against America. That was encouraging to listen to my senator, our senator, folks, in regards to where we're going. It was great. Some legislative items that he brought up. And he says they kind of come up, they kind of bubble up over here, maybe like laying carpet, where you get a bubble over here and then you get that down and maybe another one pops up another place. He was forthright in regards to the things that were coming up. One deals with liability risk. Now, when you buy an insurance policy, it's covering a risk. And they build that premium upon that risk and expenses and interest that your premium dollars maybe could earn while it's with the company. But they were trying to start then in regards to a particular risk, and many companies will cover that risk, and it's called business interruption insurance. Business interruption would be just kind of what the phrase is normal jargon, that if my business is interrupted under these definitions, and those definitions are declared in the policy, and in fact the policy is approved by each state. The jargon in that, the definitions and exclusions have to be approved by that particular state. What the legislation that was being looked at was that even though this policy has the written contract language, that the risk of the pandemic that we're experiencing would not be a covered risk, this congressional law, if it became that, would force the insurance company to go retroactive and cover that risk. A risk that the insurance company had not contemplated in building their premium at all. And John was happy to report that the co-sponsors had pulled their names from it, and it's going to die. But he said, doesn't mean what? It won't pop up at other times. Another legislative situation that might come up, he said, was that of liability. That there is a push for us to go back to work. All these things may come into play in regards to you have an employer, you have their employees, and then over here you got their clients, their customers. All of that could be a realm of liability. If they're not following CDC guidelines and things like this, there may be opening up of liability. John had brought up, he says, we're all to be practicing social distancing, and there's one particular group maybe that we wouldn't mind to continue social distancing. This is from John. He said, trial lawyers. He said, there's a line of trial lawyers already set up for liability suits, either employees or customers. So his point to us was document all the stages from the time that maybe you are applying for EIDL loans, the PPP loans, opening up, how you will greet customers, however that be. Document, document, document. In God we trust. Everyone else, document. So hang in there, folks. We've got some things here for you. Let's call them action items. Another term maybe for this action items could be that another arrow for your quiver. AIG brought up that the CARES Act has an effect on what maybe provisions of retirement plans and IRAs, particularly with the temporary required minimum distribution waiver. And they have a real good tool that we can get to you there. And how are you going to get this tool? Just contact your internal wholesaler and we'd be happy to get it to you and cover some of these points with you. Another maybe opportunity would be the extension of the time that a person could put money into an IRA. We could go down to $100 a month and you could contribute to that IRA. Contact our internal wholesaler. They'd be more than happy to give you a little more information on that. I talked about the RMD and the waiver of that. Required minimum distribution. That's what RMD stands for, folks. So make sure again that everyone understands the jargon there. MDRT, $1 Million Roundtable. They did a survey on what matters most. They asked clients. Existing policyholders thought the top three were on financial professionals. Number one, emotional intelligence. The way I take that would maybe be my own application of an early part in my career. I had a super employee named Sandra, and I was in my first office. And Sandra comes to me and says she would like some time off because she had a relative. Not immediate relative, but a relative that had passed away, and she would like to go to the funeral. I told Sandra, yes, I think you can have the time off. I think it's over here in the personnel manual in section such and such. Go ahead and look it up, make a photocopy for me, and I'll approve it. Folks, I didn't have the emotional intelligence to say, sit down, Sandra, tell me more about this relative. I wanted to what? Cut to the chase. I knew in my analytical mind, yeah, I could be approved. And I was going to let her see it, and she could go on her way. Well, she didn't leave immediately crying, but of course then she shared it with associates. And I didn't apply emotional intelligence. Maybe another word for this emotional intelligence could be empathy, folks. Empathy. Number 2 of the survey says listening. And number 3, communicating in an easily understood way. Grandma and Grandpa that went to a graduation in the month of May, and it was hot in the gym. There was no air conditioning in the gym. And they brought this president from this college to speak to the graduates, the high school graduates. And finally, he got done. And he used, again, $50 words to maybe impress himself along with others. And then Grandma leans over to Grandpa and says, what did he say? Grandpa said, school's out, school's out. So again, communicate in an easily understood way, folks. Apply the KISS formula, if you will. Here's an action tool, arrow for that quiver, and it deals with this. It comes to us from Lincoln National. Lincoln National. It talks about a tax control triangle. Maybe another analogy could be a 3-legged stool. So you would have the folks draw themselves a triangle. From that triangle, have them put those initials at the top. And then this in this corner, and this in this corner, okay? Say this triangle represents their assets, whether they be liquid assets or maybe they be long-term assets. And so up here where it says tax advantage, that then would be Example, cash value life insurance, a Roth IRA. It could be a 529 plan for education. It could be a bond. So as it says there, those examples would be tax advantage plans. Over here, TD, maybe you've already guessed, would be taxed deferred. Those could be my 401k plan, my IRA plan. Maybe they have a SEP, maybe they're a teacher and they have a TSA. Tax deferred plan. And over here would be taxable plans. Maybe it's stocks, maybe it's CD money, maybe it's the checking account and savings account. And again, at the top of it, you would have them write what this triangle really represents even before you put the initials on. And it is called a tax control triangle. And that's where then you can explore with them how their particular triangle looks. Where do they have their particular assets, whether they be liquid assets or long-term assets? And again, then you can go back and talk about the advantages and the situations of each. Kind of an old yellow pad kitchen table type concept there, which again, you could do one-on-one with person through a Zoom there. So I thought that was pretty neat there. And that's with Lincoln National. And don't hesitate to contact our internal wholesaler. It goes in much more deep dive on those particular points of the triangle, and they'll be glad to cover that with you and get you more resources in using that there. Many employees have their own pension plan working with their employer in the form of the 401k. A good question to maybe ask them would be, if the life event happened that they were disabled, would they be able to contribute to that 401k? And maybe more important would be, would their employer continue to make that contribution to their 401k? With principal, folks, that risk we can cover. And that particular underwriting is very much on a simplified underwriting basis. And it doesn't even ask for copies of their tax forms. Another communication this week from an officer of a bank. His information was, we are getting refinance mortgages right and left. The interest rate is so low that people are coming in, refinancing the mortgage. Maybe they're using part of the refinancing to take care of maybe some credit card loans, whatever it might be. They're combining that together, and they're getting these refi mortgages. Sounds like a risk to me, folks. You can cover that risk by the use of the collateral assignment form. That you can do that. We would even have the flexibility of a return of premium term. In fact, you could put that on the EIDL loan also. What do I mean by that? At the end of the term premium, they get all their premiums back. So we have the flexibility there. So contact, please, our internal wholesalers there. A big opportunity there. Long-term care. Plant that seed. Again, we have the life insurance and the with the hybrid plans of that. Well, if I die, I'm not going to get all the premiums paid. We have the solution for that. Disability with simplified underwriting. And we covered from what the people close to the risks, such as the health providers, all the way to the people with their pension plans and their 401ks there. Annuity, where zero can be a hero. Taking advantage of the indexed annuity there, folks. Or the multi-year guaranteed annuity. 7 years at 3.5%. 3.5%. Compare that to the CD rate, folks. 3.5%. And we have that there. So many opportunities there. Well, it's that time of the day, folks, where I give you my recommendations. My recommendation for a book Everyone communicates, few connect. John Maxwell, the author. Movie, Western Stars. I think you can get it on Netflix and maybe some others too. It's got the boss, Bruce Springsteen, and his wife, Patty. Bruce Patty are a baby boomer like me. It's not near the type of rock and roll that Bruce first started with. It's a little reflection, you might say, on his life. It's in the form of a documentary, and it was done in their home in Southern California, and they have a 100-year-old barn, great big gigantic barn, folks. And up in the hayloft, they then did this concert. So I think you'll enjoy it. It's called Western Stars. Bruce Springsteen. That's the movie that I would recommend. Poem that I would recommend is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's entitled "To Have Succeeded." To Have Succeeded. That's the poem that I would highly recommend. And then I'll add one with this topic of active listener. The song I would recommend is from Simon and Garfunkel. It's entitled "The Sounds of Silence." Now I have for you a video. This video was brought to us by Lincoln National. And this video is entitled Active Listening. If you recall a little bit, being an active listener, I spoke of the MDRT survey, $1 Million Roundtable survey, and on attributes that clients, when they ask the question, what attributes would you want your financial professional to have? And if you remember, they were what? Emotional intelligence. We kind of went over the definition of that a little bit. Number 2, being a good listener. And this Lincoln National video actually kind of laser focuses on being an active listener there.
What makes a really, truly excellent listener?
A great listener takes time. In other words, the time to listen, to learn, not just to be polite.
And what else do they do when they're listening well?
So it's holistic, right? So we've all been around those people. We come out of them, they say, they're really listening. Did you ever really think about why or how they made you feel? Like they were really listening. Because what they did was they listened with their whole body. They listened with their eyes, they listened with their hands, and they use this thing called double click. When you see reading an email and it's highlighted, what do?
You double click with your mouse to learn more.
And what it does is it opens it up. So if you really want to be an effective listener, take the approach of the double click. We lean in and we say, tell me more about that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
What about taking notes? Is that rude? Is that something helpful you can do when you're having a conversation with a client?
So we talk about this. Take notes versus make notes. So when someone stops you and say, if you don't mind, again, listen to learn, just not to be polite. If you don't mind, Rebecca, the whole team, or me individually, you don't mind if we make a note or two? When you say that and then you get that agreement, yeah, what you're doing is you're demonstrating that you care enough to make a note or two and to put it in the file.
So what's the right ratio between talking and listening?
Most advisors, it's a 50-50. So what we have found is that those advisors who have a 90-10 ratio, when that client leaves a meeting, is deemed they're listening. So that's 90% of the time listening, 10% of the time talking.
Tim, I've often heard you say that advisors, all of us, should quiet our agenda. Can you tell me about what that means?
When we use the word quiet your agenda, a lot of times, Rebecca, when we use the word quiet, do people speed up or do they slow down? Quiet, many times, is to slow it down. So quiet your agenda means slow it down.
But can I tell you nope.
Right. And I love that. Here you go, right? Slow it down and let them complete their sentences, right? So this is what we call an unanxious presence, right? So take a step back, make a note, quiet your agenda, slow down, an unanxious presence of fully listening.
Was I right? Wasn't that some very good stuff? I mean, not only did he bring forth maybe what continuation of the KISS formula, keep it simple, okay? But how about that tool there of building that relationship and saying, do you mind if I take some notes? Do you really think you're going to get someone say no, folks? It means, oh man, it's important. He's going to take some notes on this. Okay. Also gives the opportunity to what? This is the way I understood it. When you said the word red, here's how I understood the word red was. By taking those notes and covering that with him. Also, we used the phrase I liked, talk versus listen ratio. What is your talk versus listen ratio? Maybe it should be more listen and less talk. And he brings up a ratio himself. He says in regards to successful financial professionals, what their ratio is there. So I really liked that. And what, are you listening to respond, or are you listening to understand? Are you listening to understand? So those are some things that I brought home, so to speak, and hope that I can indeed learn from them. So I leave you with this. I guess my hint for this today, I had someone pretty darn close, but as I said, I was a baby boomer, and there was, and I liked breakfast, still have my breakfast, and there is a mammal involved with this kind of phrase a little bit. In other words, if I put this phrase and I compare that to another phrase as a baby boomer that I listen to, they kind of sound very, very close to each other. Very, very close to each other. So those are the clues, we want to call them that, for GP4U equals G. Hope you have a good week. I thank you so much for tuning in.